Hello, welcome to AGB Art. I'm Anne, and I am a fluid artist as well as a jewelry maker. And I've been getting into some different kinds of jewelry. If you enjoy this video, please press the thumbs up. It helps my channel grow. Here are the earrings that I've been making. These are made with watercolor and watercolor papers, and I love the texture on these. It's fun to play with different colors. To start with, you're going to need watercolor paper, and I recommend 140 pound because it's going to get awfully wet. You also need white PVA glue. Any PVA glue will do. You're going to mix it in a reclosable container, and I did about 3/4 glue, 1/4 water, watercolor paints, and 2 brushes. One of these brushes is a quality watercolor brush, the other one is a super cheap one. And you need tissue paper. Cut it larger than the paper you're going to put it on. Now is the time to turn on some music, get relaxed. You'll take your container of glue and your super cheap brush, mix up the glue, and paint the glue mixture onto the watercolor paper. You'll notice that I'm being really careful on the edges. This is super important for what we're going to do. I just spend a lot of time painting the glue on this paper. Yes, you could use a larger brush. I would recommend an inexpensive brush unless you're going to clean it out every time, because by tomorrow morning it's going to be stiff. When you feel like you've got enough glue on the paper, take your piece of tissue paper, wad it up, and then spread it very gently on top of the watercolor paper, tapping lightly, because the tissue paper is quite fragile right now. You might have to lift up a corner, just do it gently. Tap, tap, tap. Use the brush to tap glue on top. Especially if you have air pockets, you'll want to tap those flat with glue on top. Once you're satisfied that it has been glued completely, set it aside for a good 4 or 5 hours to dry completely. I spent about 4 or 5 minutes putting glue on this one sheet. I have sped up the video. I was not working this quickly. This is what a dried one looks like, and I apologize, it's very difficult to see. Next, I will take my watercolor brush and sit down with a dried one. I'm going to reactivate my watercolor paints with a bit of water. And I particularly like a blue and green palette. I'll get my brush wet, dip in a color, and just go at it. This is a great time to listen to music. The first layer that you put on is going to be very translucent because you're using water. But you can add other colors. You don't stick to one particular color. Right here I'm working with blue. In a moment I'm going to add some yellow, which of course makes green. And that led me to get into the green palette as well. Once you're close to being finished, you can add color where you feel like it's sort of faded. Again, Once you're finished, this has to sit aside for a good 4 or 5 hours before the next step. Here are some examples of ones that I painted this morning. This is blue and purple. Do you see how the ridges, the creases, made darker spots? This one I used more than one color, and you'll see how this is usable. I was going for some autumn colors, then I decided reds and greens. I've decided to work with the blue and purple one. I've got a 1.5 inch hole puncher, and I'm going to punch out holes, but I want you to see my mistake. The paper won't fit in the hole puncher if it's not a straight edge. So I'm taking a pair of scissors and I'm going to cut a straight line. It doesn't matter where I hole punch. I just would like to get both colors in the circle. Normally, it takes one hand to do this, but my left arm is actually healing from a couple of breaks. So my left hand is not quite as strong, and I need 2 hands to punch holes. I will punch 4 holes in this paper, but look at how cool these look. Here are the 4 circles that I cut out, and 2 match quite well, and the other 2 match quite well. So one will go on the front and one will go on the back. Next, I take a scrap of watercolor paper, and now I'm punching 2 circles out. I use these 2 circles to make the earrings stiff. I really like Aleene's tacky glue. It's worked for me. I use dollar store Q-tips, and I spread some glue on the white watercolor paper, making sure to get the edges. There is a reason for that. You might have to wait till the end of the video to figure out why. But I'm going to glue one of the purple-blue watercolor circles to this one. It's wonderful having the hole punch because they obviously match in size. And I'm off camera, but here I'm making sure that the edges meet. Every time I press down, especially on the edges, I make sure that the circle edges meet. And then I take a binder clip and clip them together and set them aside for an hour or so. Those dried really quickly, so I got back in the studio and got ready for the next step. I have sped up the next step. I was not working this fast. I'm taking the other painted circles and gluing it to the ones that just dried. I'm being really careful to get the glue off of my fingers because as you touch the circles, if the glue comes in contact with the painted part, it'll pull the paint off. So you have to be really careful. I'm just making sure the circles match up perfectly, and then I'll use the binder clip and leave them alone. I made these really quickly, and the watercolor still feels kind of wet to me, so I will probably leave these alone overnight before the next step. Once I glued all the circle discs together, I set them aside to dry for a couple of hours. I put something heavy on top of them. In my case, I had some tiles, so I just laid a couple of tiles on top of them to keep them flat. Here's why it's important that all of the tissue paper is glued properly to the disc. It will lift, And depending on what kind of sealer you're using, whether it's varnish or UV resin, that's going to affect the outcome. Once the discs are dry, I take a nail file and just lightly file off any little pieces of tissue paper or a glob of glue that might have come out, just to get those edges smooth. I'm going to use Liquitex matte varnish to seal the discs. You can buy this at any art supply store, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, Amazon, and I just squeeze a small circle out on the tile. I'm going to take a Q-tip and just lightly put it on top of the surface. You don't want to rub too hard and you don't want to put too much on to start with. You can always add more, you can't take it off. So I'm just going very lightly and trying to get all the little crevices. The reason I go very lightly is because the varnish will take the color off of the disc. And in a moment, you'll see on the edge of the Q-tip, it's now purple. Once both sides of the discs are dry, you can consider what to do with the edges. Sometimes I will use an ink pad to just lightly cover those white edges, or you can use a metallic pen or an alcohol ink pen. Now, I have issues with doing my edges, so a lot of times I just leave them. I sealed my earrings 2 different ways. Here I used the Liquitex varnish, and even though it's a matte finish, it has a little bit of shine. I like this because it's user-friendly, super easy to do. You can also use UV resin. You'll see that there's no texture. They are smooth, super shiny, but there's a real technique to using UV resin, and you need to have special equipment like the LED light. The last things you'll need to put together your earrings is some sort of drill to put a hole in the top, 4 jump rings, and then I added a little custom bead wire piece. The earring hooks that I use are hypoallergenic, and I got those from Amazon. This morning, both sides of the discs are dry, and I'm ready to put them together into earrings. The very last step is to drill a hole in the top of the earring, add the jump rings and custom beadwork, and hook. And this is the final product. These make really cute earrings, and you can see I didn't do anything to the sides of them. I just left them white. I also really like the brown ones that I made with the UV resin. Even though they're smooth and they don't show a texture, they really have a beautiful design in them. I want to thank Liz Chaderton for showing me how to do this technique and inspiring me to make it my own. I will put a link to her video in the description down below. Thanks for watching.